Hi everyone and welcome back to a new video. I am making another dessert themed soap today, and this week is a typically American soap. I first learnt about this dessert when I moved to America about 8 years ago. Today we will be making strawberry shortcake soap. So I'm going to start out making this soap by making the strawberries. I have a strawberry mould that requires the soap to be made a couple of days before the actual soap, so that I have enough time for the soap to saponify and harden a little bit to get it out of the mould without scraping the soap and damaging my strawberries. So I'm making a small batch of soap that I'm going to use to create several embeds, and I'm splitting off a little bit here that I'm going to use to make some strawberries and some raspberries. So I'm going to colour this section with some rose kaolin clay and some paprika, and I'm going to use my spatula to mix that colourant in and make sure I'm happy with my colour before I go ahead and use my stick blender to bring that to a medium to thick trace, make a nice consistency to pour into my mould. I have my mould all set up here on a cutting board, and I'm going to go ahead and pour that into the cavities. I have the mould set up onto a chopping board so that I can pop these into the oven, which I will have preheated to about 170 degrees Fahrenheit, and I will leave it in there overnight with the light on but the temperature off so that I can force my soap to go through gel phase and make this a nice reddish colour. Make it a nice deep strawberry type of colour. Alright, it is a few days later and it's time to make the soap. So my oils and my lye water are at about 95 degrees here, and my room was a little bit cold the day that I made this soap. So I am pouring my lye water solution into my oils and bringing them to emulsification with my spatula the way that I usually do. And that stops the rest of this batch from moving too quickly so I can work in layers for this soap. Once my soap is fully emulsified, I am going to split out my batter. I'm going to add about a third of it into this red pitcher, and this is going to be my first layer, which is going to be the biscuit base for the strawberry shortcake. So I'm going to add some orange peel powder to this layer for a nice orangey colour, and then I'm going to add a little bit of cocoa powder to just deepen it up a little bit and make a nice biscuity colour. I'm adding some zinc oxide to the rest of my batter for the cream layer that's going to go right on top of those strawberries. And I am going to add a little bit of that zinc oxide to my biscuit layer just to lighten it up a little bit. I'm going to go ahead and add my essential oil blend, which is vanilla and ylang ylang, to the biscuit layer right before I use my stick blender to bring it to a medium to thick trace. Now this soap is moving pretty quickly today, so I'm not going to need to use my stick blender for very long before pouring this into the mould. But I do want to make sure it's at a nice thick consistency so that it will support the strawberries that I'm going to put on top. And I don't have to wait too long for it. You can see here that it is setting up pretty quick and it is already thickening. So I brought my mould in, and you can see that my soap is no longer pourable, but I am going to put it into the mould as evenly as I can. And once I'm happy with that, I'm going to level out the top as best I can by tapping it down onto the surface of my workbench. That's going to even the soap out and distribute it nicely. And then I'm going to go ahead and flatten the top with my spatula. Now this is going to be a biscuit base, so it doesn't have to be completely flat. The strawberries are going to sit on it. I just want the strawberries to be all at the same level, so it needs to be reasonably level. These are the little strawberries that I have made, and I'm going to add those into my soap. And I'm adding those so that they are sitting on the lines. The lines on the edge of my mould are my cut lines, so that's where the bars are going to be cut. So these strawberries will end up being cut in half, and you will see the silhouette of the strawberries in the final bar of soap. It will make it look like a nice slice of strawberry shortcake. My molds will just about fit 2.5 strawberries per bar of soap. So I have some of these whole ones that I'm adding in, and then I have some ones that I've sliced in half on my single bar cutter, and I'm just adding to the edge of the loaf of soap. Now that I have all of those strawberries in my mold, I'm going to come back and work on the white layer of soap, and this is going to be the creamy top to my strawberry shortcake. So I'm using my stick blender to disperse that zinc oxide completely, and then I'm going to separate a little bit off for the topping of my soap. And I'm just filling this small pitcher about halfway, which is about 2 to 2.5 cups of soap. I'm adding the rest of my essential oils into the rest of this soap, and I'm going to disperse that with my spatula so that I don't thicken it too much. I need the first part of this soap to be nice and thin so that it gets around all of those strawberries and pushes out any air gaps. I'm going to go ahead and cover all the strawberries in the first soap, do the same in the second one, because as you can see, as I'm pouring the soap, it is getting thicker very, very quickly. I was able to get it all in and covered, and I'm going to go ahead and add the rest of my soap into my 2 loaves and split that evenly between them. I'm going to go ahead and level out the top with my spatula and just make sure that the soap in each mold is even, and put some soap into the mold that needs a little bit more. This is just making sure that my soap is getting into all of the corners. Then I'm going to texture this soap the way that I do all of my soaps. While that's setting up a little bit, I'm going to work with the soap that I just split off and use my stick blender to bring it to a nice thick trace. Then I'm going to be piping this with a Wilton 1M tip, which is a very large tip and requires a nice firm soap to pipe. It's been a couple of minutes while I was stick blending that, so the soap has set up nicely, and I'm going to use the back of my spoon to texture the top in the same way that I do with all of my soaps. I'm just putting the spoon into the side of the mold and pulling the soap into the middle to create that texture. I'm going to go ahead and texture both sides of this soap. Now I am piping on top of this soap, but you will be able to see some of the texture down the middle of the loaf and around the edges of the piping, so it will be nice to have that there. There will also be a nice point for my soap frosting to sit into and adhere to these bars of soap. Alright, it is time for that frosting, and as I said before, I'm using a Wilton 1M tip and just piping a little dollop of cream onto the top of this soap. Or I should say I'm piping cream frosting. This isn't real cream. So I'm going to try and use up all of the soap that I set aside and make sure I don't have any waste. So I'm going to go ahead and add another little dollop of the soap right on top of the previous one to use up as much of that as I can. It's going to add some nice height to this piping as well. Alright, it is time to add the last bit to the top, and I am adding some strawberries that I have cut in half. And I cut those using my single bar cutter again, like I did for the inside. And you can see I added a little dollop of soap frosting onto the other side of the loaf, and I'm just using that to adhere those strawberries onto each bar. You can see that I'm placing these strawberries in between those cut lines so these won't get cut. This is what the top looks like before the cut. Aren't those strawberries so cute? So it is the next day and I'm coming back to cut this soap. I'm so excited to see what the inside of this looks like and see how those strawberries look right in the middle of that soap. So I've lined this up on my multi-bar cutter. so that the strings are between all of those strawberries, and I'm moving the end pieces for samples. Let's take a look at the inside. Look at those little strawberries all standing up next to each other, right on that little biscuity base. I love the fact that these strawberries are all different sizes and different shades of the pink-red colour, so they really look like real strawberries that have been made into strawberry topping. You can see around the base that that biscuit layer is going to deepen up as it cures, as that cocoa powder oxidizes. Let's take a look at those strawberries on top with the cream, and we're going to finish up this video by having a look at some photos of the final product. I just love the way this soap came out. I think it is adorable. Thank you all so much for watching this video, and I'll see you next Tuesday.